Whew, it has been a week.
Yes, it has.
It has been a week. And here we are, still better than we deserve. We're going through Hosea some more. Before we get into this, and I've got some disclaimers for you, I've got to share a little bit. Cole had a joke that he told us last night. He's at that age where he's looking in these joke books, and so he said, "Why is it that pigs have curled tails?" So they can open their bottles of swine. And I was quick enough, I said, "Oh, I thought that was a pork screw." So we may be getting into a little bit of kind of muddy territory here. We're going to try not to roll in it like the pigs. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay. So these disclaimers about Hosea. The whole story about Hosea and Gomer is a story about love and unfaithfulness. And there is absolutely no way to talk about unfaithfulness without getting into things that are very offensive. The whole idea of unfaithfulness is a major offense to everything that makes us human. The desire for relationships, the desire to love and be loved, to know and to be known, and to feel safe in that kind of relationship. There is no way to talk about unfaithfulness without getting into offense. And because there is no way to even talk about it, a lot of the words even that go with it are offensive. So we're on this second slide now. Even the very words themselves, just the sound of the word can be offensive. And when we talk about these things, it surfaces hurts that we have had from different people in our lives. Some of the words may even seem crude and vulgar. I'm going to try to avoid those as much as possible, but you can't talk about it fully without that. Even some of the images, the word pictures. Some people may say, "Oh, I can't believe he said that in church." Well, it's in the Bible. That's all I can say. There's some things in there that you would not want your child to hear until they get a little older. But it's there. It's true. And it's something we have to come to grips with if we're going to live in this world and not fall into the trap of going into a holy huddle and pretending like it doesn't exist and that it doesn't impact us and it doesn't impact the people that God is trying to bring home. Probably the hardest part about all of this is as we get into this and as we let God's Word penetrate into our lives, is recognizing our own tendencies toward unfaithfulness and how it is that every time we make one of those choices, we just spit in God's eye. And we don't want to admit that we're doing that. It's easier to pretend. And so, coming at this open and honest, and just these songs that we've sung this morning, knowing that there's nothing we have done to deserve. What have I done to deserve a love like yours? Here I am, empty-handed, but I'm alive now in your hands. That's where we're going. So, let's talk the whole thing about unfaithfulness. Let's come at it with kind of a term that is not quite so as some of the ones we might reach later. Anybody know about a fair weather friend? Do you know what that is, Colton? A fair weather friend? You know what it is? All right. What about you? A fair weather friend? Kaya, do you know what a fair weather friend is? We've sung a song. It's called "Blessed Be Your Name When the Sun is Shining Down on Me, When the World is All as It Should Be." It's easy for us to praise God then, right?
Yep.
Some people, they say they are your friend. And they are your friend as long as everything's fine. But when it starts to get a little hard, then they're gone. They're even stabbing you in the back, talking about you with other people. That's called a fair weather friend. So you know what it is now? You got it? Well, as I was looking up some things, don't try any image searches for Baal or adultery or idolatry, or even with the filters on, you're going to get things that you go, you cannot unsee that. Whew. So next slide, please. A fair weather friend. Well, if you go to one of the synonyms, guess what you're going to find? User. A user. Let's look at some of those things that it says about user. When no one else is around, they need someone like you to take them places. A person who uses a friend or acquaintance solely for the purpose of gaining a type of advantage. Someone who doesn't include you in any activities they have with their friends, who you too are friends with, yet you would invite him or her. A person who completely ignores you when he or she is with a group of friends who may be, quote, cooler than you. A person who can call you anytime and you'd be there for them, yet if you try to call him or her, they'll not pick up. However, only for using purposes he or she would pick up. Like if he needs a ride somewhere or whatever it is. A person who constantly gives you excuses when you know he or she is completely full of, and I blanked that out. You might see also here in the red circle, we'll not read through those aloud, but there's some synonyms there. How quick we get from fair weather friend to Gomer. Gomer. Her name's not there, but isn't that what she was? Whew, okay. Before we get too far in, sometimes it is difficult because true friends really do go out of their way for us. And they do things for us that there's no way we can repay them. We are undeserving beneficiaries of their love. And too often, when somebody is in that low spot, that they are needing more of that kind of treatment, the devil whispers to them and says, "Oh, you're just using those friends." When we should be able to take what God says, and it's more blessed to give than to receive, and sometimes humility requires we acknowledge that we are in that place that we have to receive more and allow other people to be blessed by giving. I want to make sure we know the distinction between being a user and being a grateful recipient of blessings. Because is a user grateful? No. They're just trying to find their own way to wiggle through and get the most they can. So, as we go forward, there's a little boy that I have in one of my classes, now that I have 3 rotating through my room. And I feel sorry for him. He's not a bad kid. He doesn't know how to be a friend. And so he ends up really pestering the other kids and pestering the teachers, trying to get that positive attention that he needs, and he really gets to be annoying. He knows so little about true friendship and relationship that the only thing he knows to do is to kind of try to buy your love. So, what did he do Friday? He brought me some of his trick-or-treats to give to me, wrapped up in a little tissue. Sweet, if you didn't know the context. So, if there are kids that come in and they didn't bring 2 sharp pencils with them, which is part of the definition of being prepared for my class, 2 sharp pencils. Well, Mr. Clark, they can use some of my pencils. He's got a whole pouch of pencils. Trying to ingratiate himself. You've known people like that, haven't you? That don't know how to be a friend, don't know how to receive friendship because they turn everything into a bargain that you have to pay equal for. Everything becomes a business transaction of one sort or another. Tit for tat. That's kind of where we're going here. The nature of idolatry. Next slide. The nature of idolatry. When we say idolatry, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Golden calf.
Golden calf. Some kind of statue that people are worshiping, right? Mm-hmm. That's usually the first thing that comes to mind with idolatry. But it's not just about the images. It's not about the statues so much. Rather, it's about trying to bring God down to a manageable size. Get him down where, let's shrink that a little bit where it's not so awesome in the true definition of awesome, where you are just overwhelmed by how immense, how holy, how woe to me, I am ruined. Trying to bring God down to a manageable size, because if we can bring him down to a manageable size, then maybe we might be able to manipulate him. We might be able to negotiate with him. So this is one where we've got some to click through here. And that's how idolatry has worked for centuries. It's where people say, let's see, I'm going to do this for this God, and this God has dominion over these kind of things. So if I do this for this God, then that God can reward me in this way. You know, put this in here, this is going to come out on this side. It's just like a vending machine. A vending machine in the sky. I'll make this kind of sacrifice, I'll get this result. There is no faith there. You are not waiting. You are not trusting. It is not a relationship of trust. It is, I'm going to make this contract with you, and I'm going to fulfill my part, you're going to fulfill your part, and I get to choose when I give. And you have to do what I want. That's the nature of idolatry. It's kind of a religious cafeteria plan. You go in, you pick and choose, I want this from this God, and I want this from this God, and I want this from this God, and I can just kind of mix it all together because I'm the one that's choosing. Instead of recognizing that we don't have any choice in the matter. Remember what God said to the children of Israel? I didn't pick you from among the nations because you were better than them. It's solely God's choice. Jesus said, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you. So who's doing the choosing? Coming back to this thing about bringing God down to a manageable level, well, we bring God down to the human level. So all of the idol gods we talked a little bit last week, it's kind of like a soap opera because they're full of human foibles. They are committing adultery, they are depressed, they are prideful, they are all these other things. And so we can read in Romans chapter 1, among other places, how the whole thing about idolatry is confusing the Creator and the creature, and exchanging the glory of one for the glory of the other. And so we end up worshiping the beautiful, the powerful, the rich, the attractive, or whatever human characteristic we want to elevate. We end up worshiping that. So it's movie stars, athletes. That's what we worship. That becomes our idol because we can't deal with a God that is so far above us that it's incomprehensible. We want to bring Him down. That is the nature of idolatry. And so we get into this bribery. If you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. In fact, some of the people in the ancient world kind of got this idea in their mind that God would starve if He didn't get enough sacrifices. And in the Bible, God has to remind them, I don't need that. You're not feeding me. I've got the cattle on 1,000 hills. And I couldn't find the citation for it, but archaeologists have dug up some of these papyrus, all kind of stuff from libraries in Egypt where it's dry enough that they've been preserved all these years. And one of them, when you translate it, was pretty much a prayer to one of these gods in their time period. And Lars couldn't think of where it was either, but it's pretty much a, dear God, blah, blah, blah. If you will do this for me, I will forever be yours, blah, blah, blah. But if you don't, then blank you. Really?
It was a toothache. It was a prayer to get rid of a toothache.
Prayer to get rid of a toothache. Really there. That was a prayer. Recorded on papyrus. Thousands of years old that people found this century. So, that's the nature of idolatry. And how many people have you known who have been very upset with God because He didn't do what they wanted Him to do? The other big part about true idolatry is it gets into self-destructive behavior. Now, Paul, when he's talking about food sacrificed to idols, and he says, we know that there's really only one God, so killing this animal or cutting it apart at a temple for something isn't going to do anything to the meat. Because there is only one God. But if you're going and you're participating in this sacrificial meal as a worshiper, then you are joining yourself to the table of demons. Because that's what these idol gods are, is demons. And notice when Jesus was healing demon-possessed people, just name some of the demon-possessed people Jesus healed. Gadarene demoniac. What did He do?
Everything. He had superhuman strength.
He gashed himself with stones. He attacked people. He was naked, living out in the elements. Lived in the cemetery. This whole macabre thing. Okay, another one. The parents said, this demon's got him. He even throws himself into the fire. Self-destructive things. We could go back to 1 Kings chapter 18. What did the priests of Baal do when Elijah was making fun of them? Like, well, surely he's a god. Maybe he's gone to the bathroom. Maybe you need to call louder. They start cutting themselves to get Baal's attention. Until the blood is gushing on them. Demonic always leads to self-destructive behaviors. whether it's consumption of food, alcohol, pornography, other things connected in with whatever it is that we are worshiping that is not the one true God. How about strapping on a vest and blowing yourself up for the divine cause? Ring any bells?
Mm-hmm.
So, this whole self-destructive behavior. Let's back off from where this is so heavy right now. I want to go with a little Dr. Seuss on you, okay? Because who is the chief of the demons? Satan. And he's always coming up with the little shortcuts, right? Mm-hmm. How did he tempt Jesus? If you're hungry, turn these stones into bread. Take the shortcut. Jesus is having to trust that God is going to meet his needs. Man should not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Satan takes him up on the temple. If God's really going to take care of you, why don't you just jump off, see if he catches you? Don't tempt. And he says, you don't have to go through with all this cross stuff. Just bow down and worship me and I'll give you dominion over the kingdoms of this world. Take the shortcut. I can fix it up for you. Well, Dr. Seuss also wrote about the fix-it-up chappie. You ever remember the story of the star-bellied Sneetches? Okay. Well, let's see if he does all these satanic things. Because aren't the deeds of the flesh about enmity, striving, jealousies, and about fulfilling our cravings, sensuality? Now, the star-bellied Sneetches had bellies with stars. The plain-bellied Sneetches had none upon theirs. Those stars weren't so big, they were really so small you would think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. But because they had stars, all the star-bellied Sneetches would brag, we're the best kind of Sneetches on the beaches. With their snoots in the air, they would sniff and they'd snort. We'll have nothing to do with the plain-bellied sort. And whenever they met some, when they were out walking, they'd hike right past them without even talking. When the star-bellied children went out to play ball, could a plain belly get in the game? Not at all. You only could play if your bellies had stars, and the plain-bellied children had none upon theirs. When the star-bellied Sneetches had frankfurter roast, or picnics, or parties, or marshmallow toast, they never invited the plain-bellied Sneetches. They left them out cold in the dark of the beaches. They kept them away, never let them come near, and that's how they treated them year after year. Sounds a little bit like some events that led to that tragedy Wednesday, doesn't it? Then one day, it seems, while the plain-bellied Sneetches were moping and doping along on the beaches, just sitting there wishing their bellies had stars, a stranger zipped up in the strangest of cars. "My friends," he announced in a voice clear and clean, "my name is Sylvester McMonkey McBean, and I've heard of your troubles. I've heard you're unhappy, but I can fix that. I'm the fix-it-up chappie. I've come here to help you, and I have what you need. My prices are low, and I work with great speed. My work is 100% guaranteed." Then quickly, Sylvester McMonkey McBean put together a very peculiar machine, and he said, "You want stars like a star-bellied Sneetch? My friends, you can have them for $3 each. Just pay me your money and hop right aboard." So they clambered inside, and the big machine roared. Then it clonked, and it bonked, and it jerked, and it barked. It bopped them about. But the thing really worked. When the plain-bellied Sneetches popped out, they had stars. They actually did. They had stars upon theirs. Then they yelled at the ones who had stars at the start. "We're still the best Sneetches, and they are the worst, but now how in the world will we know?" They all frowned. "If which kind is what, or the other way round?" Then up came McBean with a very sly wink, and he said, things are not quite so bad as you think. So you don't know who's who, that's perfectly true, but come with me, friends. Do you know what I'll do? I'll make you again the best sneetches on the beaches, and all it will cost you is $10 eaches. Belly stars are no longer in style, said McBean. What you need is a trip through my star-off machine. This wondrous contraption will take off your stars so you won't look like sneetches that have them on bars. And that handy machine, working very precisely, removed all the stars from their tummies quite nicely. Then, with snoots in the air, they paraded about. They opened their beaks and they let out a shout. We know who is who, now there isn't a doubt. The best kind of sneetches are sneetches without. Then, of course, those with stars got all frightfully mad. To be wearing a star was frightfully bad. Then, of course, old Sylvester McMonkey McBean invited them into his star-off machine. Then, of course, from then on, as you probably guessed, things got really into a horrible mess. And the rest of that day on those wild screaming beaches, the fix-it-up chappie kept fixing up sneetches. Off again, on again, in again, out again, through the machines they raced round and round again. Changing their stars every minute or two, they kept paying money, they kept running through until the plane or the starbellies knew whether this one was that one or that one was this one, or which one was what one or what one was who. Then, when every last cent of their money was spent, the fix-it-up chappie packed up, and he went. And he laughed as he drove in his car up the beach. He never will learn, huh? You can't teach a sneetch. So, that's how the enemy works. Trying to stir up those cravings, those, I want to have it all, but I don't want to pay the price, except for a little price. And then he just gets it, nickels and dimes you, and takes you down, boils you like a frog, degree by degree. So, if that's the nature of idolatry, let's look a little more specific here at Israel's idolatry. What was it that they did? Well, when God brought them into the promised land, what did He tell them specifically about dealing with the people in the land and the worship practices that they had? Stay completely away. In fact, kill every single one of them so that they cannot infect you with this terrible practices. That their practices had been so vile that the land was ready to vomit them out. Well, they didn't do that. In fact, at the very beginning, what was the first city they came and conquered? Jericho. And what was the rule about the stuff in the city? Destroy everything except for the precious metals, and those go into the Lord's treasury after they're melted down. And what did Achan do? He took some for himself. He just couldn't resist. And so after they destroy the big city of Jericho and they go out to the next little town of Ai, and it won't take very many to take care of this. Well, they chased him the whole way back. Until it came out what happened. And the whole community stoned Achan and his family to death. In the valley of Achor, called the Valley of Trouble. So it started then, and it pretty soon went on from there because they didn't get rid of all of them. And pretty soon they started worshiping on the high places, just like the other people had done, instead of coming to the temple the way they were supposed to. And then in Israel it got worse, and the kingdom split. And Jeroboam, son of Nebat, put up the golden calf at the southern end and the northern end. And then, a couple of generations down after that, King Ahab went and married the daughter of the priest of Baal from the Sidonians, who they found in Carthage, another Phoenician settlement, part of the same people, tens of thousands of baby skeletons from sacrifice. And so Ahab marries Jezebel, the daughter of this priest, and brings Baal worship to a new level in Israel. And God is saying, enough is enough. So they had done this. They adopted the cultural practices of the nations instead of holding on to their identity as the Lord's chosen people, a holy nation. They decided, instead of trusting God, instead of holding on to this relationship where He chose them, not because they deserved it, but because He's God. And He welcomed them into this special relationship. And they just walked away from that and went to try to find their own little solutions. They went to the fix-it-up chappie. And what did they do it for? Well, pot of beans, little economic prosperity, little guarantee, we've got to make sure we stay well. Little political stability. In fact, in the Holy Land, there is some land that they irrigate. More over in Iraq, Iran area, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and Egypt, that land they would irrigate for farmland. But mostly in Palestine, they depended on rainfall. So any of the land that had to have rain to produce a crop, they actually called Baal land. Now that was back before this time, because Baal at the beginning just meant master. And so when you read back in Genesis, that's what Sarah called Abraham, master. And you read in 1 Peter that Sarah didn't give way to fear, but instead called him Lord or Master. That quotation in 1 Peter comes from that period, where Baal didn't have this meaning of just this false god. It was just a general term for master. And they acknowledged that this land, that they still call Baal land in Hebrew, had to depend upon the master sending the rain. Well, because in this mythology, Baal of the Sidonians, Jezebel's god, was supposedly like Zeus in the Greek pantheon, that he was the god of the storm. He had the lightning bolt in his hand. Some of the statues you'll see, he's got the lightning bolt. He was the god of the storm, so he's the one responsible for the rain. Why else did Elijah, when he's confronting King Ahab, say, it's not going to rain unless I say so. I'm the prophet of the Lord. To show that Baal had no power over the storm. Only the Lord. So we've got this whole thing going on about the Baal land. And then these people making this choice because that's the one that they think they can manipulate. The vending machine in the sky, we make this sacrifice, we get this result. We don't have to go through this trust thing, this whole faith thing, waiting on God, trusting Him and trusting that He is good, because they didn't care if the idol gods were good or bad. It was just whoever had power and whoever they could get to give them something. It wasn't about a relationship at all. And so, think about today. The things that people are doing, and all for the sake of economic well-being and to make sure there's plenty of food. Anybody heard of a company named Monsanto? Mm-hmm. There's some things to debate there, but I think anybody that is looking at it can agree that there's a lot there going on that is not right. Or maybe the Affordable Care Act. Mm-hmm. Is this bringing about justice or not? And maybe we're trying to force something that we cannot force. Or stem cell harvests. We're going to sacrifice some things in order to take care of ourselves. Someone else's life. Maybe we're going to send drones to kill. We know there's going to be some innocent people killed, but it's going to keep us safe. Or we're going to form an alliance, or we're going to treat with the rulers of this country and disregard some people that have been faithful to try to get on good terms with them. This has been going on all of history. What's happening in our country right now is not unique. It's not peculiar to this presidential administration. It was taking place in the one before as well. This is the way of the kingdom of this world, who is ruled over by the prince of this world. So, Israel's idolatry. Well, look at this picture. Y'all think that's an ancient statue?
Wall Street.
Oh, that's the bull outside of Wall Street. A golden bull. Israel's idolatry. Let's look at Hosea chapter 2. I'm going to read this to you at first from the Message, and then we'll come back in and we'll dig a little bit deeper. Haul your mother into court. Accuse her. She's no longer my wife, and I'm no longer her husband. Tell her to quit dressing like a whore, displaying her breasts for sale. If she refuses, I'll rip off her clothes and expose her naked as a newborn. I'll turn her skin into dried out leather, her body into a badlands landscape, a rack of bones in the desert. I'll have nothing to do with her children either, born one and all in a whorehouse. Face it, your mother's been a whore, bringing bastard children into the world. She said, I'm off to see my lovers. They'll wine and dine me, dress and caress me, perfume and adorn me. But I'll fix her. I'll dump her in a field of thistles, then lose her in a dead-end alley. She'll go on the hunt for her lovers, but not bring down a single one. She'll look high and low, but won't find a one. Then she'll say, I'm going back to my husband, the one I started out with. That was a better life by far than this one. She didn't know that it was I all along who had given her the wine and food and adorned her, that I was the one who dressed her up in big city fashions and jewelry, that she wasted on wild Baal orgies. I'm about to bring her up short. No more whining and dining. Silk lingerie and gowns are a thing of the past. I'll expose her genitals to the public. Her fly-by-night lovers will be helpless to help her. Party time is over. I'm calling a halt to the whole business, her wild weekends and unholy holidays. I'll wreck her sumptuous gardens and ornamental fountains of which she bragged. Whoring paid for all of this. They'll soon be dumping grounds for garbage, feeding grounds for stray cats and dogs. I'll make her pay for her indulgence in promiscuous religion, all that sensuous Baal worship and all the promiscuous sex that went with it, stalking her lovers dressed to kill and not a thought for me. And now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start all over again. I'm taking her back out into the wilderness where we had our first date, and I'll court her. I'll give her bouquets of roses. I'll turn Heartbreak Valley into acres of hope. She'll respond like she did as a young girl those days when she was fresh out of Egypt. At that time, this is still God's message, you'll address me, dear husband. Never again will you address me, my slave master. I'll wash your mouth out with soap and get rid of all the dirty false god names. Not so much of a whisper of those names again. At the same time, I'll make a peace treaty between you and the wild animals and birds and reptiles and get rid of all weapons of war. Think of it, safe from beast and bullies. Then I'll marry you for good, forever. I'll marry you true and proper in love and tenderness. Yes, I'll marry you and neither leave you nor let you go. You know me, God. You'll know me, God, for who I really am. On the very same day, I'll answer. This is God's message. I'll answer the sky. Sky will answer earth. Earth will answer grain and wine and olive oil. And they'll all answer Jezreel. I'll plant her in the good earth. I'll have mercy on no mercy. I'll say to nobody, you're my dear somebody. And he'll say, you're my God. This picture of the restoration, some of the word images that the prophet uses, because it's very poetic, and he uses these images to communicate. So this first one about the wilderness, when God brought his people to really identify them, these are my people, a holy nation, he brought them from slavery in Egypt. And he brought them through the wilderness. And Hosea says this was like their honeymoon, where he really taught them to know him as God. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. When he gave them his laws, when he provided manna for them day by day, quail, fed them on a daily basis, taught them what it is to live righteously. That was the honeymoon period. And he says, I'll start over. I'll take her back and speak tenderly to her. To give those good things that she's longing for, but not in this way where it's fulfilling cravings, but to satisfy true needs. It's a beautiful picture of how God is courting his people. And then this, that she will give herself to me. Or you may have a translation says that she will sing there as in the days of your youth. This is a very intimate kind of response. How is it that lovers interact? Those little glances, where one or two words will communicate, or just the look in the eyes, the tender touch, the response to love. She will respond as in the days of youth. Sing. There's a lot bound up in there that goes into that intimacy of how God's people will respond to him. And then this thing about the valley of trouble, or heartbreak valley, how Eugene Peterson put it. He's going back to that picture of Achan, where he was and his family were stoned to death because he took those things. He says he will transform that valley of trouble into a doorway of hope. Do you remember in John chapter 8, the Pharisees brought the woman who was caught in adultery to Jesus? What was the punishment, the prescribed punishment for that? Stoning. This unfaithful Israel who committed adultery against God, what is the prescribed punishment? Stoning. He will transform the place where you should have been stoned into a doorway of hope. And then this, no longer will you call me Baal, but instead husband. He takes that word Baal that originally just meant master, lord, sir, where the wife would have used that for a husband, a very respectful term in that culture. And he says, you're not even going to use that word anymore. It's become so associated with this idolatrous worship, you're not even going to use that word anymore. Instead, you're going to use this even more intimate term. My man. You're my man. My husband. Going back to when God created Adam and Eve. Then he said Adam knew his wife. We're going to look at this more later in Hosea 6, where he says, the reason that all this is you don't know me. That same know word when it says Adam knew his wife and she had a baby. That kind of knowledge. And when he said he made them man and woman, It's this same word, husband. This close, tender relationship with God. And then as we get down a little further, when he says about this response, verse 21, it will come about in that day that I will respond, declares the Lord. So she will give herself to me. She will sing as in the days of your youth, this feminine response. But he will respond as well. God is coming. In every connotation of that word. God himself is going to respond. And what happens when the man reaches that point? It says God will plant. He will plant his seed. In the ancient world, it was very common imagery to talk about rain as coming from God. In fact, in one of the Greek mythology, one of the half-bloods, for those of you that may have read Percy Jackson's series. Well, one of those half-bloods, the way that he was conceived was his mother receiving some divine rain. God will plant. God will respond. What is it these people needed for their land to produce? What was it that they needed to be able to live in peace and prosperity? God says he will plant. They will respond to Jezreel. Remember the first child's name was Jezreel? The name of the city where Jehu killed all these people? Well, it also means God plants. And he will raise up, I like the way the NIV says it in the end. He says, verse 23, I will sow her for myself in the land. I will have compassion on her who had not obtained compassion. That he will plant a new crop of Israelites. He's combining the imagery of childbirth and agriculture along with this divine human love. This love that goes beyond anything we can understand. That there is no way we deserve it. We deserve stoning. And yet he turns it into a doorway of hope. This is the message of Hosea. This is what God is inviting us to do. Team, if y'all want to come up as I wrap up. Every one of us that has been married at one time or another knows that in a relationship like that, in the very best relationship like that, there are times when we treat our spouse with disregard. Even where there is no physical infidelity, not even any emotional infidelity with another person, there are times when you give too much to work, where you give too much attention to a hobby, watching sports, or getting too involved with the children, and that relationship starts to suffer. You can't repair those holes by yourself. Only God's grace is enough to do that. We sang just a little while ago, your grace is enough for me. When you think about the way that each of us have done that to people that are precious to us, and that they continue to know us with all those warts, and they continue to love us, how much more is it with our God, who knows us better than we know ourselves, better than anyone knows us, and yet He still loves us. They were talking on the radio just this last week that people were more afraid of truly being known. Because if someone truly knows you, then they have the opportunity to reject you. And it's easier to keep people at a distance. It's easier to stay distracted on electronic devices, to communicate only by text message instead of face-to-face. Relationship requires that we trust, that we risk, that we put ourselves at the mercy of someone else. That is what God invites us to. He promises that He will be faithful, and He has demonstrated His faithfulness through generation after generation after generation, despite our unfaithfulness. Majesty. How will we respond to this God who loves us unconditionally?